Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Developing a Proper Worldview. This is episode number 68, and we're continuing part 4 of our series, a look into the 9/11 conspiracy, the September 11th conspiracy. So if you've been watching, you know that we've ran through 3 different sections. We had creationism, or I'm sorry, we started with the gospel, and then we did creationism versus evolution, and then we looked at the American Empire, and now we're looking into the 9/11 conspiracy. If you haven't watched these and you're just catching this video randomly, these are done in sequential order, so I highly recommend that you go back and start from the beginning. Um, the reason being is the title of the series is developing a proper worldview. Like this has to the foundations have to be laid before you can start putting up the pillars and the siding and the roof, so to speak. And so we're doing this in a purposeful order, because the information that's available out there is so overwhelming and so exhaustive, and once you get into the deep stuff, it can seem um, so far fetched and insane that you run the risk of dismissing it unless you have the foundations laid. So that's why it's important before jumping into the deep end of the pool. We need to learn how to doggy paddle first. We need to understand what it is that's going on, um, why it's going on, and before starting to look into some of the deeper, darker stuff of this conspiracy. And so that's why these are done in the order they are. It's also following a loose guideline of how I researched this, how I came to my conclusions. We're kind of following that pattern. And so, first and foremost, of course, is the gospel, because this is a spiritual issue. This New World Order conspiracy was outlined for us in the scriptures in Psalm chapter 2 and Revelation chapter 13, where the New World Order system is identified as the beast system, where the rulers and kings and authorities of this world conspire against God and desire to shake off his authority. And so the scriptures told us this was happening, and Revelation prophesied that there's coming a time in which there will be a worldwide empire in which everyone is forced to worship this empire and forced to participate. And if you don't, you won't be able to participate in the economy. You'll be cut off from finances. So you have to have that biblical foundation laid. You have to understand the spiritual realities that there's a kingdom of darkness and a kingdom of light, and we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers. That there's demonic forces behind the scenes of this. There's demonic forces influencing the people who make these decisions. That they're in their ears, so to speak, telling them what to do. In the same way, the devil came to Jesus in the garden and told him, all the kingdoms of the world are mine, and I give them to whomever I wish. And then he wanted Jesus to worship him, and of course Jesus rebuked him. And the scriptures tell us that Satan is the god of this world, small g, and that he is the prince of this world, the prince of the power of the air. He's the authority figure. He's the spirit that now works in the children of disobedience. The book of Ephesians tells us. So the lost world, the kingdom of darkness outside of Christ, is influenced, controlled, and directed to one degree or another by Satan. Most people in the lost kingdom, low level, people without any power or influence, are controlled blindly. They're blinded by their own lusts, their own desires, and they follow after those passions like beasts, like instinctual to do what you want. to serve self, to make self feel good. But there's a hierarchy of occultism that has always existed. Um, Whether you look at like Babylonian mystery religions or the Egyptian gods or the Greek gods or secret societies, there's always been a hierarchy. A knowledge is power. So people with power, people with knowledge have the power, and they don't just dish that out to anyone. You have to prove your loyalty through the hierarchy system. The easiest way to see that is in like Freemasonry, where you have to work through the levels. You're not given the secrets when you walk in the door. You're not told what it's all about. You're given vague suggestions on what it is, and as you go up the levels, you learn more and more about it. And the only way you advance is if you prove, that you're worthy of that knowledge, that you're willing to accept that knowledge, that you're willing to accept that ideology, that philosophy. And as you progress, you learn more and more until you get to the tops, where it's revealed to you that Lucifer is your God. And by then, you've already accepted all the precepts and edicts of Luciferianism, so it's not a shock to the system. Whereas if somebody walked in the door and was told, hey, we worship Lucifer, they'd be like, whoa, I'm out of here. But if they're slowly adapted to the principles behind Luciferianism, and that there's like a balm and easing of the conscience, to show them, that Lucifer isn't really a bad guy, all these things. And so when you get to that level, you're willing to accept it. That hierarchy exists in all things, in the political system, in all things. When you have to, when you get into politics or positions of authority, you have to show yourself worthy to advance. And in the highest level of politics and corporatism, the devil is the god of this world, and he gives the kingdoms to whom he wishes. And these people prove their loyalty through occultism, whether that's Skull and Bones or Bohemian Club or Freemasonry or Mormonism or Roman Catholicism, whatever branch it is. At the top level, it's exposed to them that they worship Lucifer, and when they accept that, they then have the keys of the kingdom, so to speak. They're given a piece of the pie to rule and to reign, and the highest levels of this are completely sold out to Satanism, completely sold out to the New World Order ideology, and so they have the biggest pieces of the pie. They've been given the most power by the God of this world, and they're specifically orchestrating events and governments towards this New World Order. And so that's what we're learning as we go through this. And you have to, in order to understand that properly, in order to not be led astray, like we see Kanye right now blaming Jews. He's started down the path of knowledge, but then he's been led astray. He's been distracted into thinking it's a Zionist conspiracy. And if you don't have a biblical foundation, you might fall for that. Or you might fall for it's reptilian aliens from Planet X nonsense. If you don't have that biblical foundation, it's easy to fall into stuff like that. So you have to have spiritual eyes. You have to understand that this is God's plan for the world, that nothing is going on that he didn't plan for, that he didn't purpose for. Things are occurring the way they're supposed to occur, and he has outlined for us what the end result is. And so you have to have your faith in the scriptures. You have to have your faith in his word. And excuse me, I've got a cold I've been dealing with for the last week here, but once that foundation is laid, then you can start to dig deeper. And so I'm trying, like I said, the purpose of this video series is to try to lay that out in a piecemeal fashion, so that you can absorb everything and that you can get the full picture. It's a multicolored, three-dimensional puzzle that if you were to look at it right away, it would be overwhelming. It's like, whoa, all the colors and all the brightness and all the three-dimensional popping of it would just, it would shock your system. But we're putting it together piece by piece so you can see how it all fits together, and you can get clarity and understanding on the totality of it by looking at it in this piecemeal fashion. So after we laid the gospel, we looked at creation versus evolution, because evolution is a foundational principle of satanic ideology. It erases people's trust in the scriptures. It gives them an intellectual reason to reject the gospel, to reject God. And once they've done that, they're wide open to everything. And so we looked at that, and then part 3 we looked at the American Empire, because I personally believe that America is the strong arm of the New World Order system. America is the finance and the muscle and the military might behind establishing this beast system. America is the one with military bases in 140 countries or whatever it is. America is the one that drives pop culture and moral edicts worldwide. Where America goes, the world follows. America's the driving force behind the economy and behind production and agriculture and all this stuff. So America's the muscle that is establishing the beast system. America is the one behind the United Nations. America is the one behind NATO. America's the one behind trade agreements and various other things that are setting the stage for a world government. America is the one that goes and attacks sovereign nations in the name of spreading democracy. But what they're really doing is tearing down resisting nations that resist a New World Order system and want to remain sovereign states. America breaks them down and merges them into the system. So we looked at that, and now we've started the 9/11 series, part 4 of our series, just because I feel like that really sped the New World Order up. Until then, it seemed like it was a very slow, gradual build. From Francis Scott Bacon and the New Atlantis, the founding of America, to the New World Order head families, the elitists taking control of steel and oil and media in like the late 1800s, early 1900s, to those same people taking over the banking system in America through the Federal Reserve in 1913, through World War I and World War II, where they shook the world into fear so that the world would be ready to accept the United Nations, and propped that up. And then it slowly, throughout the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, it seemed like it was just a slow progress of continual spreading of this American empire and a demoralization of society. And but after 9/11, it really seems like things escalated. Like things became more urgent. The New World Order system started to emerge much more aggressively after 9/11. And 9/11 was a staged event. It was an event that they used to justify an invasion of the Middle East, a takeover of these sovereign states that were not participating in the New World Order system. Afghanistan, Iraq, stuff like that. And also allowed them to take over the oil fields, the opium fields, so they were able to monetize that as well. But the main focus was to break down those sovereign countries to merge them into the New World Order system. And so 9/11 was used as a trigger, as a to get the American populace so frightened and upset and angry that they would go along with this invasion. All they needed was the media to tell them repeatedly, over and over, terrorists, 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 terrorists. And people became convinced, yes, Afghanistan did this. Yes, there's weapons of mass destruction. Our government needs to go in there and take these people out. So they used the 9/11 event to do that, also to invade privacy through the Patriot Act, the Terrorist Act, able to search and seizure in your house without a warrant, to read your emails, to tap your phones, to read your texts. You fast forward to today, where everything is done on an open platform through various social media, and we're censored on there. We're they're reading everything. Now we got AI that is constantly invading our privacy. Your phone is constantly recording and listening. You talk about a mattress, and all of a sudden you've got ads on your feed for mattresses. You talk about, hey, or you do a Google search for a new car. All of a sudden your feed's got all sorts of ads for new cars. There's a constant spying, and these big corporations, you got to remember, they're owned by the same people that own the banking systems, which are the same people that lobby and buy and pay for the politicians. So it's a conglomeration of different spheres, but all controlled by the same CEOs. So when Google is spying on you, the CIA is spying on you. The banking system spying on you. They're all interconnected. So forgot where I was going with that, but excuse me. Anyways, that's a long introduction here. So I was pretty discouraged. YouTube took down my two previous videos with the Loose Change series. So go to Rumble, and you can watch my videos there, uncensored, unblocked. That's the key right now, and who knows how long that'll remain unblocked. I was thinking, like, I wonder if I should set up my own website and embed my videos on the website, but who knows how long that'll last either. So we'll just I'll go where the Spirit leads me. I feel like I'll probably eventually do that, Lord willing. It feels like in my spirit, like that's something I should probably do. I'm lazy, so it takes me, and I'm a procrastinator. So pray for me. I've got a lot of the videos that I downloaded or uploaded to YouTube. I no longer have on my computer, which is kind of frightening, because if YouTube ever bans me, do I lose those videos? So if you could pray for me as well. I want to go through and download all those videos to my computer so I have them saved. But without further ado, we're going to jump into this new documentary, 9/11 Mysteries, which, to be honest with you, I don't remember what it's about. I had it marked down as one that we should watch, so it's something I have watched in the past. I don't remember anything about it. There's quite a lot of 9/11 documentaries. It's one of the most open conspiracies if you want to research it. It's so blatant and in your face. I mean, if you watched the Loose Change ones, you saw there that, I mean, the greatest evidence are like World Trade Center building number 7 collapsing in on itself, even though it was never struck by a plane and just had a few small fires. Modern day steel structured skyscrapers do not collapse due to fire. The only ones that have ever done it like that are on 9/11. And people say, oh, well, they were struck by planes. Not Building 7. Building 7 was 47 stories tall, was the furthest building away in the World Trade Center complex from buildings 1 and 2. So the World Trade Center complex, you had building 1 here, building 2 here, building 3 here, 4 here, 5 here, 6 here, and 7 way back here. And 7, later on that day on 9/11, collapsed in a free fall in on itself. It was a controlled demolition. Jet fuel does not burn hot enough to melt steel. That's pure science. You can go look that up. Jet fuel is basically just kerosene. It's when you have a gas stove, your steel frame that you set your pots on does not melt, even though you have that thing cranked, for an hour or whatever you're cooking. and the fire is just blue, it's so hot, it doesn't melt the steel. Yet we're supposed to believe orange flamed fire melted giant steel structures in these buildings and caused it to collapse in on itself at free fall speed. The reason I keep bringing up free fall is because each floor had its own individually steel and concrete support system. So when one floor collapsed, it would meet resistance, and then it would collapse and meet resistance, and so on and so forth. So if that building did collapse in on itself, starting with the floors that were struck by the plane, those top floors would have fell and would have hit resistance on the next floor, and then the weight would have caused it to collapse. So it would have been like this, and then a little bit quicker as the weight got more. But they've scientifically shown that it would take like 47 seconds for that to happen. This happened in 10 seconds, free fall, which means every floor's support structure had to be blown out of the way. You look at the Pentagon, where they say a plane struck that building. The hole was nowhere near big enough for a 747 jet. It was one hole. The windows next to it were still standing, where the engines should have gone into the building, where the wings should have gone in, where the tail section should have gone in. There was no damage, just one hole, like a missile had gone in there, not a plane. They released those few frames of security camera footage. There's no plane in the footage. It's just a stream of smoke. That's not a plane. Everybody, you can go watch a plane take off or land. You're not going to see a stream of smoke that thin. You're going to see a big, huge plane coming in. And if it were to crash into the airport, it would knock out not just a small hole. It would knock, out the whole. A plane is a huge thing. So we have so many things that video showed us that beyond a shadow of a doubt reveal to any thinking, open-minded person that, whoa, something's going on here. Like, these planes did not cause it, and why? All right, and then you look into like the Project for New American Century, where a year before 9/11, the people on the Bush cabinet talked about needing a new Pearl Harbor event in order to justify an invasion of the Middle East. Once they're in office, that happens, and nobody goes, hold on, did you guys talk about this exact thing? NORAD being told to stand down by Dick Cheney. Repetitive history in America of false flags. From the Gulf of Tonkin, which got us into the Vietnam War, to the Cuban Missile Crisis, where the Secretary of Defense wanted Kennedy to crash jets and blame Cubans for it, to Adolf Hitler burning his own Reichstag building and blaming it on Poland. There's false flags all over it where countries attack themselves or allow attacks on themselves in order to justify their actions. So we got all that from Loose Change, a wonderful, amazing documentary, probably the best I've ever seen. Like I say, if you didn't catch it here on YouTube, go to my Rumble channel, which is the same username, KingRam417, and you can watch it there along with all my other videos. So, without further introduction here, I've gone rambling on quite long, so let's just jump into the video here. 9/11 Mysteries. Like I say, I don't remember what it is, so I'll be watching it with fresh eyes, just like you will. Let's do it. All right, here we go.
Bringing joy to children.
For my baby.
Rub my seasoning.
My name is Brad, and I'm a conservative Republican. Last summer, I happened to come across a video on the internet about the World Trade Center collapse on September 11th. As a kind of demolition hobbyist, I downloaded it and watched it. The title was Painful Deceptions by a guy called Eric Huffschmidt. The video made me angry. I was determined to prove the maker of this video wrong. I purchased DVDs about 9/11 from CBS and PBS Nova, including one made by the Naudet brothers. These were considered the official videos. And after watching them carefully and researching thousands of websites and archives on the internet, literally not sleeping for an entire week, I realized that the official story, not Eric Huffschmidt's Painful Deceptions, was unprovable, unsubstantiated, absolutely wrong. What you're about to see is information you should already know. Our news reporters, government, and media should have made all this material available to every one of us. Ask yourself why you've never seen it on TV.
This is as close as we can get to the base of the World Trade Center. You can see the firemen assembled here, the police officers at the dive.
On September 11th, we learned that 4 passenger planes were hijacked and taken radically off course. Within an hour, 2 of the planes had flown into the enormous steel towers of the World Trade Center, creating fires and eventually toppling them. Dazed by the news, the American public soon believed the fires in the towers had burned so hot they caused the steel frames of the buildings to give way. A myth developed, fed by official sources through the media.
So when I'm looking at that rubble, the first thing I'm thinking about it honestly, it infuriates me. Like, still, it takes me back to that day thinking, hearing Mayor Rudolph Giuliani talking about how they had gathered the debris onto ships and sent it to China. Like, what in the world makes sense about that? What? How does that make any sense at all? Why? Why was all that evidence shipped over to China? How does it make sense? You know, it's that alone should cause anybody to go, whoa, what is going on, man? What are you trying to hide? What are you trying to cover up? You don't get rid of the crime scene and ship it overseas. For what possible reason could you have?
To a bewildered audience.
So when it was attacked again, he immediately...
Elements of the myth. The impact of the airplanes, gallons of burning jet fuel, steel melting, the buildings failing and suddenly imploding. In a mere 10 seconds, 110 stories hurtled earthward, pulverizing into dust.
We ran to the building and went into the...
Right from the start, on the street itself, the official story was born.
Come out of nowhere and just scream right into the side of the Twin Tower, exploding through the other side. And then I witnessed both towers collapse, one first and then the second, mostly due to structural failure because the fire was just too intense.
Like, that guy wasn't set up, man. That guy was mostly due to structural integrity because the fire was too intense. Who on the street's gonna know that while it's occurring? Come on now. That guy ain't real. It's a staged guy. That's an actor. It's a CIA agent.
The myth bled into the FEMA report and was echoed by the experts.
Just imagine. Put yourself in that situation. Let's say something simple. You see a fight, and you see a guy punch a guy, and it breaks his jaw and 3 teeth fall out, and somebody comes up to you and says, "Hey, what did you see?" And you say, "Well, you know, I saw a fight break out, and you know, I saw the guy punch him, and I saw 3 teeth fly out, mostly due to his bad hygiene, and you know, he hadn't been to the dentist in 7 years, and he had some loose teeth, and he had a weak jaw due to a lack of calcium buildup." How in the world would you know that stuff? You know, come on.
It was the combination of the impact load doing great damage to the building, followed by the fire, that caused collapse.
John Skilling and Les Robertson were the structural engineers who designed the streamlined steel frames of the Twin Towers in the 1960s. Because a wayward Army bomber flew into the Empire State Building in 1945, The towers were built with skyscraper crashes in mind.
The airplane
specifically designed to withstand plane crashes because of the crash in 45 on the Empire State Building. They built these to withstand that.
we were envisioning was the largest airplane of its time, flying slowly and low, lost in the fog. We designed the buildings to take the impact of the Boeing 707 hitting the building at any location.
But the aircraft that hit the towers was a Boeing 767, heavier than a 707, fueled for a transcontinental flight and traveling fast.
707s and 767s are comparable. The maximum takeoff weight of a fully loaded 707 is almost 334,000 pounds. As airplanes only carry the fuel load they need, the smaller model 767s that struck the towers were not, in actuality, maximally fueled or close to their maximum takeoff weight. As for the heat of the fires, listen to the radio communications of these New York City firemen.
We got tanks. I throw in the pockets of fire. We should be able to knock it down 2 lines. Where you go that? 78th floor. We got tanks. I throw in the pockets of fire.
Yeah, think about that. When that plane hit and that big fireball rolls out, that's most of the jet fuel. Like, most of it is exploding and burning off right away. The rest that's left is just, gonna light furniture and stuff on fire, and you're gonna have a small, basically like a house fire, which is not anywhere close to enough to burn through a steel through steel. Like I say, an intense blue flame on your stove can't melt steel. Steel melts at 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Jet fuel burns at 1,500. It's not possible.
Isolated pockets of fire. 2 water lines to knock them down. FEMA's executive summary relays that much of the fuel in the planes, jet-grade kerosene, was consumed by the initial fireballs and the following few minutes of fire. It then tells us that the burning jet fuel spread between floors and ignited the building's contents, causing more fire and generating heat. This was somehow enough to bring down the tower's 47-column steel core, 236 exterior columns, and thousands of steel trusses all at the same time. Watch the towers smoking in the aftermath of the plane strikes. If you have ever tried to light a wood fire, you will know that smoking logs tell you the fire is not burning successfully. Smoke is the sign of an oxygen-starved fire. The Twin Towers stood for over an hour, smoldering but not flaming. During that time, thousands of people were evacuated by way of the stairwells. Others, trapped by debris, stood in the smoke-filled windows and signaled for help. In fact, the towers did what they were built to do.
The building was designed to have a fully loaded 707 crash into it. That was the largest plane at the time. I believe that the building probably could sustain multiple impacts of jetliners because this structure is like the mosquito netting on your screen door, this intense grid, and the jet plane is just a pencil puncturing that screen netting. It really does nothing.
That's crazy. Did you see up in the corner? So that was recorded in January of 2001, 8 months prior to 9/11. And that recording, it said, has been missing since 9/11.
The screen netting.
The towers were built to withstand 140-mile-an-hour gusts produced by winter storms. Anyone in them on a windy day could feel them swaying. The single impact of a jetliner was no more of a blow than the continued battering of a hurricane.
I was just putting my stuff away, and all of a sudden we heard a loud crash, and the building started shaking, kind of moving like a wave.
New Yorkers were stunned 1 hour later when the first tower fell.
To the best of my knowledge, the considerations of the fuel in the airplane in terms of an explosion or a great fire was not considered. Now, we were not responsible for that aspect of the design.
Imagine building expressly for airplane impact, but never thinking of the fuel.
They were fire retardant. They built them for fires.
Never before in the history of the world has a steel building collapsed due to fire.
I have not seen, until recently, a protected steel structure that has collapsed in a fire.
True infernos have raged hot and long in steel-framed buildings, but not one of the buildings ever came down. In 1975, the World Trade Center's North Tower suffered a nighttime fire that flamed for 3 hours, spreading vertically from floor to floor. It burned twice as long as the fires of 9/11 without even a hint of a building collapse. In February 2005, the Windsor Tower in Madrid, a skyscraper undergoing reconstruction, sustained a 20-hour fire.
Think about that. These skyscrapers, they're made out of steel. Steel will not melt under those temperatures. You can have a fire on it for 20 hours, it ain't gonna melt. And then they have fire retardant steel, so it's even more resistant to flame. You know, it's ridiculous. The whole premise is insane, dude. The whole world needs to be awake to this. It's so evident, so overwhelming. There's no logical, sane reason to believe the official narrative. They're lying, all right? And science caught them in the lie.
This is what was left, a standing building strong enough to support a crane. Compare a 20-hour inferno to 90 minutes of smoke. Why are buildings made of steel? Strong, light, and flexible steel frames offer many advantages over wood and concrete, especially where skyscrapers are concerned. Steel makes big buildings relatively light, with tremendous load-bearing capacity. The upper floors won't crush the floors beneath them, and steel holds up better to weather and fire.
Most skyscrapers are built on steel or concrete frames, which is a grid of columns and beams that goes all the way through the building. The World Trade Center was different. It was what engineers call a tube structure. It was a very, very strong mesh of steel that surrounded the exterior.
Inside, there was the core, a rectangle of 47 columns made of 4-inch thick steel at the base, thinning with increasing height. The cores combined might with ingenuity, anchoring the towers and allowing them to flex. Look at the size of this steel. Solid, prefabricated floor assemblies, welded metal floor pans placed on top of trusses both welded and bolted to the vertical frames. The story we were told. This rock-like steel grid gave way because fire warped the trusses, causing the bolts to fail. As the trusses sagged and fell, the floors dropped with them. In its 2002 documentary, Why the Towers Fell, PBS creates a video model.
Once the trusses fail, the floors they were holding cascade down with a force too great to be withstood. The result is what's called a progressive collapse, as each floor pancakes down onto the one below.
What remains standing? The tall, indestructible core. Why does PBS fail to explain the complete
How did the core fall? That big, huge huge steel structures. You know, again, what they're showing is an impossibility. Each floor would have met that resistance and slowed down. And they've done studies. It would have taken 47 seconds for the entire thing to collapse. It collapsed in 10, which means every structure had to be blown out, controlled demolition style, including those big center columns, which on the previous video we heard people that were working in the basement heard huge explosions. They thought like it was a generator exploding. It was probably those center columns being blown out. And then there's something like thermite. Thermite cuts through steel. Thermite like burns super hot, and they used they showed heat vision of the site days after the attack, and there was still extreme heat coming. Like molten lava would have been like thermite is what would have been used to do that. It would have cut through those big steel structures. But again, that all has to be set up beforehand. It's like in the weeks leading up to this, they set everything up and then waited for these terrorists to take the planes, which they allowed to happen. They knew it was going to happen. They just stood aside and let them do it. And then once they crashed them in, they just sat back basically and like flipped a switch and boom, blew everything up, caused it to collapse.
Appearance of the Twin Towers cores. The official story's central thesis is based on heat, temperatures high enough to weaken steel. But people in the towers did not report such heat. Think about it. Neither steel, concrete, nor glass can burn. So what in those buildings could have burned to make such heat? How do these firefighters describe the collapse of the North Tower?
We started running, floor by floor, instead of popping out.
It was if they had detonated.
Yeah,
if they were planned to take down a building. Boom, 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 boom.
All the way down. I was watching it and running.
And others give similar descriptions.
At 10:30, I tried to leave the building, but as soon as I got outside, I heard a second explosion and another rumble and more smoke and more dust. And then a fire marshal came in and said we had to leave because if there was a third explosion, this building might not last.
Like it sounded like gunfire, you know, bang, 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 and then all of a sudden 3 big explosions.
Started walking down the stairs. We made it to the 8th floor. Big explosion. Blew us back into the 8th floor.
Do you know if it was an explosion or if it was a building collapse?
To me, it sounded like an explosion,
but it was a huge explosion.
Chief Albert Turry told me that he was here after the events that took place this morning. He tried to get his men out as quickly as he could, but he said that there was another explosion which took place, and then an hour after there was another explosion in one of the towers here. So according to his theory, he thinks that there were actually devices that were planted in the building.
Reports of bombs in the buildings, explosions. A CBS reporter to Dan Rather.
But I was coming toward the World Trade Center looking for CBS crews and asked a firefighter if he saw any. All of a sudden, there was a roll of explosion, and we could see coming at us a ball of flame stories high.
Listen to the sound of a large explosion right before the South Tower begins to fall.
This is as close as we can get to the base of the World Trade Center. You can see the firemen assembled here, the police officers at the dive.
Sound reaches us after what we see. If the boom we just heard was the sound of the building collapsing, it would follow the collapse. Instead, the boom is heard before.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Bring it back.
Let's consider the characteristics of steel. Steel is an alloy of iron containing added carbon for flexibility, workability, and strength. In the days of old, blacksmiths heated iron till it was red and pounded it for hours to form it. Horseshoes, knife blades, and plowshares were typical creations. Steel was introduced in the mid-1800s, and by the end of the century, with the advent of the blast furnace, found widespread commercial use. A blast furnace is known as a controlled environment. High temperatures are reached as oxygen is pumped into a closed space. How and when does steel melt? Steel melts at temperatures of 2750 degrees Fahrenheit and above, attained only in a blast furnace or when a powerful incendiary such as thermite is used. Steel or any substance that is burned will never become hotter than the temperature of the fire or heat applied to it. An open-air hydrocarbon fire reaches a maximal temperature of some 1200 degrees Fahrenheit in...
Think about that. That's in just a regular fire, house fire, whatever. It's half the temperature of what it takes to melt steel, and that's regular steel. These buildings have fire retardant steel, so it's like a third of what it would take. It's simply scientifically impossible for jet fuel and office furniture to burn hot enough to melt steel or even to weaken it. It doesn't even weaken until like 2,500 degrees. So it's ridiculous scientific impossibility. It is impossible that those buildings collapsed due to fire.
A dirty or uncontrolled burn, characterized by red-orange flames. Red-orange flames are what we saw on September 11th. Even the fireball caused by the plane strike was red-orange.
See, man, when I discovered all this is what infuriated me. Because then my thought was, well, why is the government lying to us? And then you think, man, they have such control. They're able to control the media so that they don't report the truth. They just go with the narrative. So then you start to realize the media is just a propaganda tool of this government. And then you sit like, why would the government do this? And then you start looking into that, and then very quickly you're going to discover New World Order, and then you're in 20 years deep like I am. But this is what started it all, just realizing, wait, what they're telling me happened did not happen. It's impossible. So they're lying to me. Why?
A controlled burn falls between a dirty burn like a fireplace and a controlled environment, the blast furnace. A controlled burn employs a regulated mix of air and fuel, an example being your gas stove or the engine in your car. You can fire up your gas stove all day long, making soup, roasting a duck, or simmering a stew. Made of steel, your stove will not melt, and nor will your pots and pans. This is a kerosene heater designed for use in any ordinary house. The heater runs on jet-grade kerosene contained in this tank. Made of steel, the heater can operate all night and all day. The kerosene fumes ignite and burn inside it, never causing even the smallest part of this heater to weaken or melt. Yet we were led to believe that these tremendous buildings, framed in steel and surfaced in aluminum, totally collapsed from small scattered fires and 90 minutes of smoke. Take note of these hurtling beams, thrown laterally outward as the tower comes to earth. Would fire have the strength to eject such huge hunks of metal? MIT engineering professor Thomas Eager's 2001 paper is officially considered the academic standard for explaining the World Trade Center collapses. In it, he tells us that steel loses half its strength at 650 degrees Celsius, and that the fires that day did not get much hotter than this. He stresses, however, that the fires did not burn evenly. It was the uneven temperatures that caused the steel to deform and some of the floors to fail. These falling floors brought down the whole building.
While it was impossible for the fuel-rich diffuse flame fire to burn at a temperature high enough to melt the steel, its quick ignition and intense heat caused the steel to lose at least half its strength and to deform, causing buckling or crippling. This weakening and deformation caused a few floors to fall, while the weight of the stories above them crushed the floors below, initiating a domino collapse.
In plain language, straight from MIT.
And again, 47 seconds for those floors to fall like dominoes. Not free fall speed.
What do falling buildings look like? What do demolitions look like? We are seeing typical implosions, characterized by gutting a building's base and then pulling it into itself. Computer-controlled sequencing fires the explosives in a rapid wave. Notice the jets of shooting concrete, the flashes, the pops, the caving of the buildings as they fall into their footprint, the tremendous, billowing clouds of dust. Now let's look at the collapse of the Twin Towers. We are seeing explosions rather than implosions, a first in demolition history. A sequenced rumble becomes a roar as debris is thrown outward. The damage is not contained. Even the windows are blown from neighborhood buildings. What kind of energy enabled this? Would fire hurl metal and concrete sideways into the air? Here, a 600,000-pound chunk of steel, twice the weight of a Boeing airliner, was flung 400 feet, wedging itself deep into 3 World Financial Center on Vesey Street. A FEMA photographer taking pictures of Ground Zero wondered why so many steel beams were jutting from neighborhood buildings. Watt shot pieces of the towers all the way across the street. In April 2006, New Yorkers were distressed to learn that bone fragments, human remains from 9/11, had been found on the roof of the nearby Deutsche Bank building.
And how, in God's name, did those fragments get there?
It surprised me that there was still bone fragments or human remains that had not been discovered.
How is it possible that after 5 years they're finally looking on the rooftops of the Deutsche building? I mean, that's crazy.
And bone fragments less than a centimeter long. How could they be so small? So much to be explained. Why did the South Tower fall first when it was the second tower to be hit? Watch the top of Tower 2 leaning outward, about to topple. Then, suddenly, it disintegrates in midair. What causes this giant slab of steel and concrete to turn into dust before our eyes? Watch both buildings collapsing straight down, directly into the path of most resistance, which is all the floors and all the mass of the building itself. The World Trade Center towers came down in approximately 10 seconds. Seismic data from Columbia University puts the North Tower collapse at about 8 seconds and the South Tower at approximately 10. Lynn Simpson, a survivor from the 89th floor of the North Tower, describes the site.
And I saw the Trade Center literally collapse in upon itself floor by floor by floor, and it took seconds for it to happen. It was a massive building, and it just pancaked.
10 seconds. These are 110-story buildings coming to Earth at free fall speed, the rate at which an object drops through air. The lower floors would need to give way completely as the floors above them fell. Can a person walk through a closed door as quickly and smoothly as one that is open? A 10-second collapse means the upper floors encountered no resistance from the undamaged floors beneath them. Watch the demolition wave rushing straight down. Here the South Tower is half its original height, but wreckage from the upper collapse has not yet fallen this far. We are watching a demolition moving faster than gravity itself, a building bursting into powder from top to bottom. Here, the core of the North Tower finally gives up. 700 remaining feet of giant steel columns, among the strongest ever erected. What force acts upon the core to make it all of a sudden disappear? Eric Hufschmidt, author of the book Painful Questions, is a metal-cutting software engineer.
The floors of the World Trade Center towers were on three-dimensional mesh of steel beams. You have to keep in mind now the floor is about an acre in size. There are thousands of joints all over it. In order for the floor to fall down, thousands of joints would have to break simultaneously. So then if you look at the speed at which this came down, less than 10 seconds, you blink your eye and thousands of joints just pop somehow. The only way you can explain that is with explosives. They had to have had explosives placed all over the floors at the primary joints. And then that would explain how all of the joints broke at such a rapid rate. The debris was crashing from one floor to the next. Debris cannot crash through steel and concrete floors as fast as it falls through the air. And there was no slowing. Explosives had to be breaking the joints ahead of the falling rubble, which is why the top half starts off collapsing slowly and then it starts picking up speed.
This is a pancake collapse. Why don't we see piles of floors at ground zero? And paper blown everywhere. Wouldn't a pancake collapse have trapped the contents inside? What blew this paper all over New York? If you were to drop a billiard ball from the top of the Twin Towers, it would hit the ground in just over 9 seconds, the average time it took for the towers to fall. Helped by gravity and falling through air, the ball will gain speed. The calculation for a pure pancake collapse of 110 stories, with each floor pulverizing to get out of the way, is 96 seconds. In the real world, with the floors creating resistance, a pancake collapse would lose speed. Never would it gain speed. The airplane struck the towers high above the ground. But down in the lobby of the North Tower, marble facing flew off the walls. The windows
What caused that? The firefighters get there and the lobby is blown up. Come on, man.
shattered, all the glass blown out.
Right away, a guy from the Port Authority told him the damage was somewhere above the 78th floor. But all you had to do was look around. It was obvious. Something had happened right there in the lobby.
You just saw that all the windows were blown out. The lobby looked like the plane hit the lobby.
Like the plane hit the lobby. What caused so much wreckage in the lobby? William Rodriguez, a maintenance employee at the World Trade Center and the last human being to exit the towers alive, describes a giant blast below his building.
And all of a sudden, we heard an explosion. It was a huge explosion that came from under my feet, meaning that it came from the sub-levels between B2 and B3. And then there was a huge explosion at the top of the building. You could hear the difference from the bottom and all the way through the top. The one from the top, which was actually seconds after, was heard very far away. The one at the basement was pretty loud, and you felt your actual feet moving with the floor. The tremor that is sent through the floors, that the walls cracked and the false ceiling totally collapsed. And that's when a person named Felipe David came running into our office saying, "Explosion, explosion, explosion." And when I saw him, he has all his skin pulled from under his armpits and missing pieces on his face.
An explosion deep down in the tower before the plane crash 95 floors above. Others lived to report enormous explosions below the towers. Construction worker Philip Morelli was in North Tower sub-basement 4 at the time of the first plane strike.
I go downstairs, the foreman tells me to go to remove the containers. As I'm walking by the main freight car of the building, in the corridor, that's when I got blown. I mean, the impact of the explosion, of whatever happened, it threw me to the floor, and that's when everything started happening.
Blown to the floor. Let's hear what happened next.
I was racing, I was going towards the bathroom. All of a sudden, I opened the door, I didn't know it was a bathroom, and all of a sudden a big impact happened again. And all the ceiling tile was falling down, the light fixtures were falling, swinging out of the ceiling. And I come running out the door, and everything, the walls were down, and now I started running towards the parking lots. There was a lot of smoke down there, there was a lot of people screaming. People came with us running up the ramps.
Philip then ran underground to the South Tower.
You know, you got to go clear across the whole from 1 to 2 World Trade Center. You know what I mean? That's the way you got to run. And then all of a sudden it happened all over again. Something else hit us to the floor. Right in the basement, you felt it. Walls were caving in, everything that was going on. I mean, I know of people that got killed in the basement. I know of people that got broken legs in the basement. People that got reconstructive surgery because the walls hit them in the face.
Engineer Mike Pecoraro in the 6th sub-basement found the parking garage and machine shop reduced to rubble. Rescue firemen and civilians spoke of hearing explosions throughout the towers. Firefighter Lou Caccioli told People magazine that as he and others evacuated workers, bombs were going off inside the building. Explosions stalled elevators and filled entire floors with smoke and debris.
An eyewitness who said there was an explosion on floor 7-8. 7-8 to dispatch, we've just had another explosion.
Warren Street because of the secondary explosion. We've got numerous people covered with dust from the secondary explosion.
And we got another explosion on the tower, 1013 down with 2 has had a major explosion and what appears to be a complete collapse surrounding the entire area. Who's involved in the secondary explosion?
William Rodriguez, helping the firefighters, reports blasts within the North Tower well before it fell.
As I went up, I remember listening to small explosions on the upper floors, and these small explosions were not coming from the area of the impact. It was coming from lower floors.
And when the second plane hit the South Tower,
we heard boom! When we heard boom, inside our building, the North Tower, we heard pa 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 pa. And on the security radio, we heard, we lost 65, meaning the 65th floor collapsed. And as we went down the stairwells, you could hear the actual collapsing inside the buildings. You heard rumble, you heard the cracking of the walls, I mean, pieces falling right next to us of the actual building.
Insane. Imagine being there. These evil rulers and authorities, man.
What happened at the base of the towers just before they came down? Smoke appeared at street level.
They're gonna die.
This video was shot from New Jersey. An explosion is heard as white smoke rises at the base of the building.
Now people are gathering in large groups. In fact, at one corner, it mostly was coming from the city. Folks stepping out of bodegas and stores.
Watch the camera shake on its tripod as a large energy source rocks the ground. 9 seconds later, the North Tower falls.
I heard like an explosion and then a cracking type of noise. And then it sounded like a freight train, rumbling and picking up speed. I looked up and I saw it coming down. As I came out of the North Tower, everything started trembling under my feet like an earthquake. The only thing I saw was a fire truck. I ran towards the fire truck and slid right under, when the building started to collapse right on top of the fire truck.
Across the Hudson River, Richard Siegel was filming An Astonishing Day. The sound meter of Richard's camera caught something very significant. Adjusted for the distance involved, as sound travels more slowly than what we see, the camera registered multiple explosions in the towers. Here is the South Tower record. Then the building fell. Let's look carefully at the collapse itself. Notice the puffs of concrete issuing from the sides of the building well ahead of the collapse wave. Called squibs in demolition language, these are actual explosives, charges firing visibly through the exterior as gravity pulls the building down. Here are more.
These wicked rulers and authorities, they play with our lives like it's a game, you know? They don't care about anybody. They call us chattel, you know, and we're just useless eaters, you know, we just take up resources. To think about, you know, just blowing up a building full of people. Dude, that's so wicked.
Shattering from the top, engulfed by banana peel plumes, these were no ordinary implosions. The Twin Towers each consisted of 3 multi-story buildings set on top of one another. To sustain the weight of so many floors, the sky lobbies had to be extra heavily reinforced. Watch a big squib coming from the sky lobby band. A powerful blast produces what is called a shock wave. Explosions generate extremely high compressional waves that exceed the limits of surrounding air and space, creating a violent force.
When the debris started coming down, I was right in the shadow of the South Tower. I was less than 100 yards away. Everybody saw the video over and over again of that cloud chasing people down the street. It was like a tornado. It was like being hit by a wave at the beach. But the wave was intense, it was hot, it was noisy. It was like getting hit in the back by gravel. Blocks, like somebody had picked up handfuls of rocks and was just throwing them at you. And the noise kept coming and coming. And one second I was running, and the next second I was flying. I was just, I had no control over my feet, no choice as to what direction I was going. I was in the air, and it seemed like I was being followed by this tornado. This tornado of darkness.
The South Tower fell first. This is the shockwave blast as it rocks the tower next door. As the buildings fell, they darkened Manhattan, filling the air with billowing clouds of dust and ash. What produces these huge, scudding, cauliflower-like masses of slowly moving dust?
Man, that's what I saw when I woke up that morning. My girlfriend was like, turn on the TV. I saw this. I didn't know what was going on, man. I thought we got nuked. I was like, I was packing my bags, like, man, I'm going to Canada. I ain't getting drafted. I'm out of here. We're going to war.
True, a 110-story building has just been reduced to 1 million tons of rubble. But is there anything in our experience we can compare it to? A volcano.
The U.S. Geological Survey website provides us with a definition of a pyroclastic flow as a ground-hugging avalanche of hot gas and debris. The rising gas chimney is clearly visible in this photo of the North Tower implosion with pyroclastic flows between buildings. The cauliflower shape of the debris clouds is a telltale sign of pyroclastic flows generated by massive explosions typical of volcanic eruptions and controlled demolitions.
That is the second building that has gone down. It came out.
A pyroclastic surge can even flow over water as hot gases carry dust created by explosive energy. Here, the South Tower implosion creates a pyroclastic surge moving out over the Hudson River.
A volcanic eruption produces exactly the same thick, scudding ash, heavy with debris, hugging the ground as it flows out from a tremendous internal explosion.
I think we'll stop there. We'll watch the rest next time. Alright, so I'm not going to give a long outro. I did quite a long introduction prior to this video, but yeah, I mean, the 9/11 conspiracy is so overwhelmingly obvious that you know, if you have any doubt, videos like this ought to shock you into reality and cause you to wonder, okay, why would our government do this? Like, they obviously did it. It's obviously covered up. They're obviously lying. What's the reason behind it? And then you start your dig, and you're going to find the New World Order. You're going to find occultism, Luciferianism. And if you deny the scriptures, you know, if you refuse to believe what the scriptures say, then you have to figure out some way to justify the demonic occult influence. And so, you know, you're going to go, oh, it's aliens, it's shapeshifters, you know. Or you're going to blame the Jews. You're going to blame the Zionists, because you're going to eventually discover the misleading document, the learned elders, or the protocols of the learned elders of Zion. And yeah, you're going to be led astray. So you have to have a biblical foundation. You have to understand that this isn't aliens, it's not the Jews, it's rich, it's uber rich satanic elitists who worship Satan and have been given the kingdoms of the world by him. He owns the kingdoms of the world. He owns Norway, Japan, France, Italy, Brazil, America. He owns it. He owns Bank of America, U.S. Bank, Citibank, Wells Fargo. He owns AT&T, DuPont, Kellogg, Heinz, all of it. You know, it's all. He has the kingdoms of the world. They're his, and he gives them to whom he pleases, and he gives them to the people who worship him and prove their loyalty through various occult societies. Doesn't care which occult you go through. It's just different denominations of Satanism. So, you know, whether they're more high-level Mormons or high-level Freemasons or high-level Roman Catholics, doesn't matter. At the top, they're all worshiping Lucifer. And at those very tippy tops, they're so sold out that, you know, they'll follow the edicts of Lucifer, and they're given the kingdom so that they can move things towards the end goal of Lucifer, New World Order, an antichrist system. And that's the agenda. That's their goal. Get rid of God. Get rid of Christianity so we can do whatever we want. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. That's the Satanic Bible. Aleister Crowley, commandment number 1. And that's what they want. They want to do whatever they want to do. And unfortunately, these people think they're better than everybody else. You know, and so they got no problem raping children or killing people or doing whatever. They got no issues doing that because they think everything belongs to them. We're all theirs. They can do with us as they please. So, yeah, it's a wicked society, but very, very good documentary. Very scientific, evidential. So, yeah, we got about halfway through it. Lord willing, we'll finish up the next half next time. All right, thanks for watching, guys. As always, I appreciate it. I love you, and we'll talk to you next time.